right? Naughtiness! Anyway. Hi everyone, it's Melissa, your plantita abogada here at Tasteful Nodes, coming to you today with a trilobe episode. So I'm sure you guys are pretty much aware that we've got so many different types of plants with ears. Yes. Question is, what do I have in my collection? And that's exactly what I'm going to be sharing with you today, are the trilobed plants in my collection. Before I get started, I'd like to go ahead and get through my disclaimers really quick. They are pretty important for this episode, so bear with me. 1, KKB tayo, kanya-kanyang bayad. For the Westerner friends, say it with me. We each pay our own way. If you see anything here that you must have in your collection, I absolutely don't blame you, but please don't spend your rent money and absolutely don't come for me because I'm not paying any plant child support. Number 2, I'm not an expert. The experts that I will be referring to today, and there will be a few, will be flashed across the bottom of the screen, and they will also be located down in the description box below. Check out the sources and suggested readings portion of my description, okay? And then number 3, because I'm not an expert and because we likely don't live in the same country, town, province, please, please, please do consult people who are near you, who have experience with these plants in your area. They can tell you pricing, general care, where to buy them, and they would be great sources of information. So all I'm here to do is just to tell you what I have in my collection and to plant that little seed of want and need and, you know, support your plant dreams. Anyway, so as I was saying in the beginning of this episode, today's episode is about the trilobed plants, right? So when I refer to trilobe, I'm referring to a plant or a leaf that has 3 portions to it, 3 separate portions to it, right? So we've got a longer lobe in the middle normally, then we have 2 smaller lobes on the side. Can you see this guy? So the trilobes, they do have a article, or maybe they have an updated version, a revision to the trilobes that should be coming out. Dr. Thomas Croat, who is the curator at the Missouri Botanical Garden, is the person who is coming out with this anticipated revision. And I'm quite excited because I do have a few plants in my collection that I am a little curious about, just based on descriptions, but we'll get to that in just a second. First plant I'd like to start out with, let's move everybody out of the way, is this guy right here. So this, my friends, is what is referred to as the Philodendron Mexicanum. It is likely named Mexicanum because of where it was located in Mexico. It was first described in the 1800s. And the thing is with the Mexicanum though, it's not just located in Mexico. It's actually endemic to Mexico and much of Central America as well. With this guy, we obviously have the trilobed leaves, got those 2 ears right here, and this nice long lobe in the middle. But also with the Mexicanum, you've got these really cool red backgrounds. And we'll go ahead and take some video for you so that you can see it up close and personal, right? Also a feature of the Mexicanum, so its common name is dog-eared philodendron. And if you look at the ears, absolutely looks like a dog's ears right up here. So the leaves come out with red undersides. You usually have some red markings as well near the petioles, where the petiole insertion is. And this guy is a great, great climber. I mean, just a general fast grower. I've propagated this plant multiple times and shared it with a few people as well. A fun fact about the Philodendron Mexicanum is the fact that this guy can both be terrestrial and epiphytic. Epiphytic meaning it climbs up trees, it lives in trees. So this guy can do both. Talk about multitasker, huh? This guy, it goes by the name of Philodendron 69686. The name is derived from its ascension number that Dr. Tom Croat actually assigned it while he's researching it to see if it is a species or its own hybrid or whatever. Stuff that is above my pay level. Anyhow, that's where the name came from, its ascension number. If you have a look at this guy, here it is, this gorgeous leaf right here. Other specimens have been confused for the Joepii, the Philodendron Upi, and that's because some of the specimens have shorter leaves or thinner lobes on top. But this guy doesn't. And it's quite obvious that this is not a Philodendron Upi, and it is quite obvious that is also not a Philodendron Holtonianum, which is another plant that it's mistaken for. The only other plant in my collection that I could possibly mistake it for is the Philodendron Sanctamartinense, and that's just because of this little area right here. But I'll go ahead and show you later why they're not the same plant. Fun fact about this guy is that no one's really sure about where it came from. One thing that is sure is that if you're familiar with the name Betty Waterbury, you're also familiar with the name Anthurium waterburyanum. But Betty Waterbury actually collected her plant, or got her specimen, from another famed source in the plant world, famed landscape artist Roberto Burle Marx. The original Philodendron 69686 was actually found in Roberto Burle Marx's collection, hence people not actually knowing where it was collected. It has been assumed that it is from the Amazon basin, possibly from Brazil. So another fascinating thing about this plant are its inflorescences. I'll have you zoom in right here. Have a look at these guys. So, in a story relayed to us by Steve Lucas from Exotic Rainforest, he went to Dr. Croat with inflorescences from his 69686 and showed both of the sealed flowers, right? Here we go. And Dr. Croat actually busted out a box with other sealed inflorescences, and he explained these inflorescences do not stay open for a very long time. You either have to be there or you miss it completely. Now, when these inflorescences open, for what little time they do open, check this guy out. He looks like he's unfurling a little bit, but I'm guaranteeing you we're gonna miss it because we are not scarab beetles waiting alongside it. So this particular type of scarab beetle that I'm referring to, I'll go ahead and put the name at the bottom, or the species name at the bottom of the screen. It waits for these inflorescences to open, and as soon as it opens, this beetle, accompanied by its mate, enter the inflorescence to perform their mating dance, their mating ritual. And as they perform this ritual, they collect pollen on their legs, on themselves, because apparently inside this plant, or inside this inflorescence, is a resin also, which the pollen sticks to. When they're completed with that, they move on to the next inflorescence, spreading the pollen, mixing the pollens, again, ensuring that the 69686 would be pollinated. Unfortunately, we are not in Brazil, where this is possibly native to, and we don't have those beetles here, so I don't think I'm going to see berries off of my 69686 anytime soon, unless I actually decide to keep an eye on it and do it myself. So that's the fascinating thing about this plant. Let's move on to our next. Next up on my list is the Philodendron Upi. There we go. It's a harder name to pronounce, but it is the way it's supposed to be. And I'll tell you why in just a second. Let me go ahead and give you a nice close-up of this guy. This is the newest leaf. Oh yeah, gorgeous, isn't it? Perfect representation of what it should look like. Check that baby out. So this was found in Guyana by the naturalist Joepii, and I hope I'm not mispronouncing that name because it's really important to pronounce people's names correctly. Joepii. He is a naturalist, and I'm sure you recognize the name, Upi, Joepii. Yes. This plant is characterized by these really, really thin lobes on top, as well as this voluptuous center lobe. I mean, and it just keeps getting better. So younger leaves actually have less noticeable lobes, less noticeable ears, I suppose, compared to more mature forms, but they do have that signature hourglass shape right here at the bottom. Yeah, as they develop into more mature specimens, they tend to develop those famous ears that they're known for. Now, an interesting fact about the Upi is that it was originally mistaken for the Philodendron 69686. And it's also been mistaken by another namesake of the naturalist Joepii, right? Which is called the Munnenii. The Munnenii is the only other philodendron named after Upi, and it is actually a registered scientific name, right? So Philodendron Malloyei. However, that plant is completely different, a bit wider, does not have this odd appearance that this plant has, that the Joepii has. And this has been sold mistakenly under those two names, 69686 and Malloyei. With this guy, they assume that it's a natural hybrid, meaning that it hybridized itself in the wild, had nothing to do with man's interference. But a sad thing about this plant is that as of the time the article was written, Steve Lucas at Exotic Rainforest said that there were only 2 specimens in the wild, meaning this is one of the more rare plants in the wild at the time he wrote his article. It's a fairly easy plant to care for. We've had this for almost a year now, and it's given so much growth. I mean, yes, right here. So that guy. Let's move on to the next one. The next plant we have up is the Applanatum. And for the longest time, I thought I had one, because like I said in my teaser description, mistaken identities, right? Oh gosh, mistaken identities just go hand in hand with these kinds of plants, with the ear-lobed plants, right? Let me tell you about the Applanatum. So the Applanatum, this guy right here, this specific specimen was a gift to me by my good friend Carlo. Hi Carlo, this is your baby. I'm so sorry. So what happened to this leaf is the dog-eared plant got bitten by a dog. Anyhow, this is the prettiest leaf until this new leaf comes out right here. So we're going to use this as an example, okay? The Applanatum is a native of Colombia and the Amazon basin. This plant is often mistaken for either the barrosoanum and or the Sanctamartinense, which could be a big whole mess in itself because I can't find any information on that plant. But let me go ahead and show you what it looks like anyway. So this is the plant that was sold to us as a Sanctamartinense. Here's the Applanatum. Yeah, do they look similar or what? Yeah, pretty similar, I think. This was a plant or a leaf that we got in transit, but the similarities are incredible. Thing is, with the Applanatum, you have a semi-cylindrical petiole that starts at the stem, and then this petiole starts flattening the closer it gets to the apex of the leaf. Look at how flat that thing is. Yeah. Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 plants that are often confused for one another. I mean, they're not the only plants that are confused for one another, but in this little group, it's these 3. So first I mentioned the Applanatum. Then I'm going to show you the second one. This is what was sold to me as a Sanctamartinense. It looks exactly like a barrosoanum would, right? And as you would expect, a barrosoanum, unlike an Applanatum, would have a terete or round petiole, right? And this does, absolutely. However, the Sanctamartinense, or the one that was sold to me as a Sanctamartinense, check this out. I'm going to bring it a little bit closer to you guys so you can see it. Look at the back right here. Right here. Yeah, check that out. So it's got a red marking around where the petiole meets the leaf, right? And this red marking appears on all of its leaves. As far as internodes are concerned, the Applanatum has longer internodes compared to this guy, to this specimen that was sold to me as a Sanctamartinense. And I'll go ahead and show you the barrosoanum's internodes in just a little bit, so you can see the difference between the 3. So remember when I talked about mistaken identities? This is one of those guys. This plant is a native of Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Brazil. You see why I need my notes. I want to make sure I get this information correct. I could not find any direct information to tell me why it was named the way it was, but based on her prolific contributions to the world of botany, I would assume that it's named after the botanist G.M. Barroso, who also had several other plants named after her, including Tillandsia graciliae and other genera as well. I am talking about the Philodendron barrosoanum. So if you take this all in, I mean, it's just a massive, massive plant. There's my hand, and there's the barrosoanum. It's a tri-lobe plant. It's subcoriaceous, meaning it's less than leathery. It's kind of thin, actually, if you think about it. It is semi-glossy, If you look at the older leaves, yeah, that's dirt. Don't mind it. But yes, semi-glossy. It has variable shapes. So this plant has a wide variation between one plant and another. But this is what mine looks like. The difference between this and the other plants it's confused with is the fact that its petioles are terete, meaning they're round, nice and round. Check that out. And I don't know if you can see it better here, but yes, definitely terete petioles. Fun facts about this philodendron is that it is also commonly known as cow-faced philodendron. This plant is both an epiphyte and a hemi-epiphyte. And if you crouch down here with me, let me show you what I'm talking about. So, given the chance, a hemi-epiphyte is a seed that will probably fall to the ground, will grow there, but will find a way or a tree to climb up on, and it will. And it will produce bigger leaves as it does that. So, let me get the weeds out of the way. There we go. That is our Philodendron barrosoanum. Let's go check out our next plant. The easiest way to tell the difference between your Sanctamartinense, your barrosoanum, and your Applanatum is by looking at its petiole. They each have their defining characteristics that I enjoy, so I would recommend getting all three. But if I can only have one, I would choose the Applanatum just because of that special petiole you have right here. I didn't mean to fondle my plant in front of you guys. So this plant that I'm about to mention has been mistaken for the three that I just showed you, but its saving grace are its juvenile leaves. We had to take a little bit of a walk away from the filming situation because it's in the ground and it's doing really well. It is the Philodendron Camposportuanum. Now this plant is a native of Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, Venezuela, South Guyana. And it is named after Brazilian botanist Paulo Camposportuanum. And if you have a closer look right here, this gorgeous guy, yes. So the juvenile leaves are velutinous, yes. So let's go ahead and see if we can find one of the juvie leaves of these guys. Here we go. So got a little bit of velutinous leaves right here. They tend to be a bit more velvety if you look at them. And as they mature, they actually lose some of that velvety appearance. And they become, I guess, more coriaceous in appearance. So you've got a velvety looking leaf right here. Another one right here. And these are brand new leaves. So they're newly unfurled. But as they harden, they're going to lose some of that appearance. Yeah, have a look at this strand right here. This is another strand. See how big it gets? And this is actually a reason why the Camposportuanum also gets confused with the barrosoanum, Applanatum, Sanctamartinense that I have. In fact, it was understood that perhaps the Camposportuanum and the Sanctamartinense are the same thing, but unlike the Sanctamartinense that I have, the Camposportuanum has no markings on its petiole insertion on the apex, as you can see here. Nothing. And it's got that velvety appearance, some red undersides. Just an all-around great plant. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and I agree completely, is that the leaves, or this plant actually prefers to be on the ground. It's a terrestrial plant. The plant changes in shape from, say, a hederaceum look to a trilobe. It was described to science by noted Brazilian botanist Graziella Maciel Barroso. And if that name sounds familiar to you, it is barrosoanum. There we go, guys. Bingo. The ontogeny of the Camposportuanum is what makes it my favorite. I mean, it's like you get two plants in one. It's like the Monstera dubia. You get that beautiful shingler that eventually turns into these massive leaves with its own character, you know, the fenestrations. With this guy, you have these little heart-shaped leaves that turn into these huge trilobes. I mean, two plants in one, right? You can't get any better than that. Like I said, it's happily terrestrial, but according to my notes, it can also climb. We have not given it the opportunity to climb yet, just because it's gotten bigger, more mature leaves just happily crawling along the bottom of the greenhouse, but it might be worth seeing for science and experimentation what it can do as it climbs. Let's go on to our next plant. So the next plant on my list is this guy. Pretty, huh? Yes. And let me go ahead and get my notes because this one's a little long. This is called the Philodendron Panduriforme. It is a native of Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, Colombia, parts of Venezuela, and in areas of the Amazon basin. I couldn't locate any information as to who or what it was named after. Its defining characteristics are its coriaceous leaves, right here. Yes, so coriaceous referring to a leathery feel of the leaves. The upper lobes, as you can see here, come out and turn downwards. That's another defining characteristic, are these two guys right here. This plant is both epiphytic and hemiepiphytic. So it can start as a seed on a tree and grow from there, or it can actually start from the ground, climb its way up a tree. There are two forms of this guy. You have the Panduriforme, var Panduriforme, or you have the var, I'm reading my notes because this is really important, we're talking names, var Reichenbachium. So I gave you the general description of what a Panduriforme should look like, right? The variety Reichenbachium actually look completely stretched out, which these newer leaves seem to be showing. I'm not quite sure, but it would be fascinating to find out which Panduriforme this is. With this guy, as you can see here, I have him growing easily on a coconut thread pole. He's fairly easy to grow. He's still looking for more things to climb based on these massive amounts of aerial roots right here. He has been mistaken in the past for the bipennyfolium, but if you've seen a bipennyfolium, there's no mistaking that this guy is his own plant. Now, let's go on to the next. The next plant on our list is a native of Mexico, Central America, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, parts of Brazil. It was first described in 1829, and its name refers to its three-part structure. Three. I'm referring to Philodendron Tripartitum. If you look down here, hello, this is why it's been confused for a Philodendron Holtonianum, or the Holtonianum for it. It is a hemiepiphyte, so it actually can grow from the ground, but it will start looking for something to climb, as evident here. When you cut a leaf or a part of the stem to propagate, it's actually quite aromatic. It smells so good. And if you've ever done this with a, let's say, a homalomena, same thing. It is thinly coriaceous, meaning you've got this thin, leathery feel to it, right? It is a semi-glossy plant, as you can tell, even by the older leaf, the parts that are not wet. It is described as an aggressive aroid on exoticrainforest.com. It's been said to keep pace even with the growth of syngoniums. And if you've grown syngoniums, you know that those things will take over everything it touches. For this plant, the undersides can be green or can be red or purplish. And here in the Philippines, they refer to these tripartitums as the Tripartitum redback. The next plant on my list is another one of those plants that has a mistaken identity, one that isn't confirmed just yet. In fact, there are two of them sitting in front of me that are confused for each other. And I'll show you in a little bit why I think they're different plants, considering there isn't much information out there on them. But, you know, I'm not the expert. The experts have yet to speak up on these plants, and I'm just waiting with you. But let me go ahead and show you what I have in the meantime. The first plant is the Philodendron Holtonianum, or at least this was what was sold to me as a Holtonianum, okay? There we go. So the Holtonianum, tri-lobed plant, smooth petioles, and coriaceous leaves. At least that's what it feels like to me. You know, it's pretty coriaceous, leathery feel. It's thick. I don't have any information as far as why it was named that way. All I do know is that according to Steve at Exotic Rainforest, it was what Dr. Croat referred to it as. So that's the name that he's going by, And since they're more experts, that's the name that I'm going by. It's absolutely a tri-lobed leaf. The trilobes, as the leaf gets bigger, tend to even out a bit more as the leaf matures, as you can see here, compared to younger leaves. Man, my younger leaves look terrible, but you'll get the idea anyhow. Here we go. He's a little curly. No, here we go. So younger leaf, not as well developed and definitely not as wide as the older leaves. You can see this longer lobe right here. Let's go turn this guy this way. As I said earlier with the Holtonianum, its lobes tend to even out or tend to get larger over time with maturity, as is evident again by this leaf right here. I mean, it's pretty darn close, right? But not only that, so the lobes actually appear with age. So I have an immature cutting, you know, I think it was a mid-cut that we made, that one of my dogs made, if I'm going to be transparent about things. But let me grab it real quick. Let me get my hair out of my face because I've got enough plants covering it as it is. Don't need to look like like Cousin It from the Addams Family or anything. So I was referring to immature juvenile leaves, and check this out. Juvie leaves of the Holtonianum have no lobes. It's just one complete strap. That's how confusing this guy is. Another interesting thing about Holtonianum is its ontogeny. Ontogeny refers to the physical changes that occur to a leaf from it being a juvenile to, you know, on its way to maturity. That's ontogeny, the changes between the physical leaves, right? From a strap all the way to lobes. Strap to lobes. Okay, so when this plant was initially discovered, it was confused to be a Tripartitum. In fact, its synonym, when you visit a few websites, I think including Q, it says that its synonym for the Holtonianum is Tripartitum. So Dr. Croat says that this is possibly its own undescribed species. So it's not a Tripartitum, guys, it's a Holtonianum for now. And according to my notes, I have that it's a climber, and that is very, very true. I mean, give this thing something to climb on and it will go nuts. Not much information is available for this philodendron. That's what I have in my notes. And trust me, it's true. Because it has lookalikes, it is often mistaken for other plants. Like I just mentioned, the Tripartitum, right? It's mistaken for that. But the next plant is a plant that's often mistaken for as well. And let's dive right into that one. Information on these plants is really, really scarce. And I don't have any information as to where it's endemic, who it's named after. In fact, I wasn't able to find much information at all, except for pictures on aroidpictures.fr. Yeah, that's how odd it is. I mean, there are people who discuss this plant on Facebook, but not anyone who is willing to go on the record saying, yeah, this is exactly its species, or this is separate from Holtonianum, nothing like that. So I'm not going there either. I'm just going to describe to you what I have and why it physically looks different from the Holtonianum. I don't know if these changes are brought on morphologically, so depending on where they're grown, or if these changes are a matter of ontogeny. This plant, my friends, I've been looking for this one for a while. Give me a second. Let me put this guy down real quick. Get him out of the way. There we go. I've been looking for this plant for a while. This is a Philodendron Palorenzi. So if you look closely, it looks pretty similar to the Holtonianum, right? Here we go. Holto. Come closer, my dear. Holtonianum Palorenzi. Similar, but not the same. And I'll give you close-ups so that you see what I'm talking about. The Palorenzi that I have actually has these, I don't know how to describe them, has these lobes that come off straight into this downward trend, right? And a lot of these lobes are actually bald where it meets the petiole. Kind of like the Lelanomiano, where it's bald. It's got these bald posterior midribs. The Palorenzi that I have, also has bald posterior midribs, right? Not only that, the leaves, they are coriaceous, just like the Holtonianum. I'm getting too familiar with my plants. Majority of the difference lies in the posterior midrib for these two, the bald posterior midribs. Younger leaves of this guy actually have this paperish feel to it, and I could probably show you the texture on them up close so you have an idea of what I'm referring to. The textures are absolutely different too. The Palorenzi, or the plant that was sold to me as a Palorenzi, has all of these veins that you can see against the sunlight, whereas the plant that was sold to me as a Holtonianum doesn't. I mean, it's got these deeper veins that go across, and it's definitely a thicker leaf compared to the Palorenzi. So a difference between the Palorenzi and the Holtonianum that we have, and I'm just going by the names that were sold to me, not saying that these are definite IDs for these plants, is that the petioles of the Palorenzi are striated. They almost have a camouflage appearance. The posterior midribs are bald. That's another characteristic of this plant that's different. And another thing is this. So there's this marking on all of the leaves of this Palorenzi that appears to be like a black or purple line that goes around it. So all of the leaves have this black or purple line, darker line that goes around it. And finally, the petiole insertion of this leaf, it just goes straight into the midrib. I mean, there's nothing else around the petiole insertion, unlike the Holtonianum, where the petiole insertion, you've got the posterior midribs surrounding it as well. These guys don't have it. I mean, just have a look. Since I'm not an expert at any of these, I'm not going to say that this is a morphological change, nor am I going to say that this is ontogeny, that this is going to turn into this. No, I'm just going to show you that I have two plants that were sold to me under different names, quite similar in appearance, but also with obvious differences. And that is it for these two. Now, the final plant on our list is a fairly new described species, and I'm really excited to have one. She's gorgeous, and if there's any plant here that I would recommend you buying, it's absolutely this one. I mean, Joepii is gorgeous, right? But this, my friends, she's a looker. This is a Philodendron Malloyei. Meloi. I don't know how to pronounce it. She's new. Okay, this is a Philodendron Malloyei. And check out that new leaf, just gorgeous. So it's a trilobe. So this plant right here is a native of Brazil. She's named after parataxonomist Antônio Tavares Melo. This plant, according to the notes that were presented when it was introduced, prefers to be terrestrial. The profile remains constant. Of course, I had to take mine off right before filming. So yeah, good job, Mel. The new leaves come out a pinkish yellowish hue, which is what you see here, with those pink edges, and which you see here best from the back. Yes! And the roots are purple when they're young, and they turn brown when they mature. And I definitely see the purple roots here. Newer roots turn out purple, a light pink, and as they get older, they brown. So yeah, I would definitely recommend trying to get a hold of one of these guys, just because it's such a fantastic plant. Really gorgeous. It is an upland plant, so the humidity in uplands probably needs to be replicated to keep it happiest. But based on my hair right now, you could probably tell that the humidity in this greenhouse is pretty high. So I think we're going to do really well with her here. And that is my tri-lobed philodendron episode. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to give this a thumbs up. Share it with other people who might enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on your notification bells for future content. If you want write-ups, more pictures, check me out on Facebook. I'm there as Tasteful Nodes. If you just want to relax before going to bed, look at some pretty pictures as you head off to Sleepy Town, check me out on Instagram. I'm there as Tasteful Nodes as well. Okay guys, until next time, sa uulitin, Keep your nodes classy and tasteful. Bye. Let's put everybody here for picture taking session.